Hello there, internet. Mogwai here, and I got another MTG video for you guys today. Today's video is not the usual, though. We're going to be talking about some MTG news, some very important news at that. It is the banned and restricted announcement, aka the death of Field of the Dead in Standard. As of today, October 21st, they have announced that Field of the Dead will be banned from the standard metagame of Magic the Gathering, and this includes paper gameplay and digital gameplay as well. This is a very important deal, and it's not a surprising one, though. The vast majority of the community expected exactly this to happen after Wizards said that they were going to advance the banned and restricted announcement by a couple of weeks or 3 weeks from the original intended date. And this happened, I believe, a few days after their prior banned and restricted announcement, which included no cards, and a certain community riot, in a way, ensued. And thus, most of us, saw Field of the Dead getting banned coming. But like I said, there were certain people that were perhaps expecting more out of this announcement and would have liked to see other cards receive the ban hammer as well. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go over their reasoning for this ban, and I'm going to give you guys my perspective on it and what I expect to happen with standard, what kind of standard metagame will flourish out of this ban, and overall where I stand in regards to that standard metagame that we expect to happen. And I'm also going to be a little bit of a, defender of Wizard of the Coast in this video, because I think to a certain degree their decision to just only ban Field of the Dead is responsible in a way, because I like that in this announcement they are not hiding the fact that there are other problems in standard, and they're not oblivious to it by any means. They have the data, they have access to social media just like everybody else, and they know full well what's up and what the issues are. But as I'll explain in a bit, they're a little bit more reluctant to jump onto other cards and would rather see the metagame flourish off of this and then see if they have to take action again. So before anything, I want to give a shout out to my boy Merchant. He made a video talking about the most problematic cards in Standard. He goes over them and says, which ones he would like to see banned and which ones he wouldn't. And I pretty much agree with everything he says on that video, which is not surprising because I do talk with Merchant a lot about MTG. In fact, he's my go-to guy whenever I have to vent about MTG frustrations. We all have that person in our lives, I guess. And I believe it's vice versa. We vent to each other quite a bit, and we talk about standard and our mutual love for 3-mana planeswalkers, amongst other things. And yeah, it's not surprising that we see eye to eye on pretty much everything that I said on that video, as I do agree with it. And I highly recommend you guys check it out because it's a very good watch, very informative, and for those of you who want to know more about standard and the issues that people have and how it could be better, then I highly recommend it. So having that said, let's hop on to the reasoning behind this ban. And it's a pretty good one. It's pretty well explained. Let's go over it here. Since the standard rotation, one of the strongest and most metagame defining decks has been a ramp deck that uses Golo's tireless program to find Field of the Dead. The deck has not only maintained a high win rate and metagame share, but has also restricted the space of viable competitive strategies in Standard. So what they mean by this is that the deck is not only very powerful, but it's also very oppressive towards other potential strategies that aren't really seen playing Standard because this deck exists. What does this mean? What specific strategies are being oppressed? Well, primarily late game decks, because it turns out Golo's Tireless Pilgrim is, with Field of the Dead, is the king of late game decks. They have this never-ending engine that becomes more and more powerful as you find other copies of it in Field of the Dead that happens to be a land and therefore very hard to interact with. This engine generates a massive board state that enables us to, or enable the Golos player to both friend the opponent and also defend against creature attacks while building up your mana through various means of ramp and going for big power plays such as Hydrate Crassus and Agent of Treachery to just finish off your opponent. This late game is uncontested. Any other deck that tries to thrive in a late game scenario will be completely overwhelmed by this. And therefore we see a total lack of control decks in this meta in which things have been so polarized that you either have Planeswalker builds trying to contest this with their ultimates trying to win the game, for example, as like my preferred deck in Standard right now, which is Grixis Fires of Invention, though you also have the Jeskai version, or hyper aggro strategies that try to kill off these ramp Golos decks before they can get their juice going. That is pretty much what the metagame is right now, and they explain all that here. I basically just gave you a TLDR of it, Mogwai style, I guess, and that's pretty much the deal, right? So they say beyond just the strength of the strategy, Field of the Dead presents a number of other problems for the metagame. The repetitive onboard nature of its effect can cause games to frequently play out in a similar deterministic way. Since Field of the Dead is a land, it can be difficult for many archetypes to interact with, further limiting the metagame's ability to adapt. Finally, the long-term advantage Field of the Dead provides often leads to prolonged games. Games are longer, both in paper and in Magic the Gathering Arena. They obviously have this data. Ever since Magic became accessible in the digital world, there is a considerably larger amount of games being played. So they have more data, and they realize that, games are taking much longer than before because Golos decks don't end by turn 4 or 5 by any means. Unless, you scoop early, because, when you're facing Golos, you can tell when the game is over at a relatively early state, but not everybody concedes, right? People don't want to give up and stuff. Field of the Dead ramp decks represent 42% of the field at Mythic Championship 5. We saw Gruul aggro take the crown, but this is not an indicator of Gruul being a good deck at all. I wouldn't even say it's harshly tier 2, but Javier Dominguez piloted it really well. He's one of the best players in the world, and he also got really good draws. Honestly, he got good draws. His opponent didn't get as good draws. He got a bit lucky in a lot of these games, and he also piloted the deck close to perfection, or perfectly. Like, I didn't watch exactly every game, but he did really good, and he won with Gruul aggro. But that doesn't change the fact that Golos was extremely dominant in the tournament and was super represented as well, in a field where other pro players were prepared to combat it as well if they weren't running it themselves. So this is important to know. You can't just focus on one source of data and be like, oh well, it's fine because in this tournament this guy won and he wasn't playing Golos. That's just not an argument, basically. And they say that the outcome at Mythic Championship 5 did not affect this decision. And, they explain why Field of the Dead is ultimately going to be banned. So before I jump into the last paragraph, I want to clarify that I like Field of the Dead as a card. Ever since this card was printed and ever since I got to play the Scapeshift banned Field of the Dead deck for the very first time, I really like this card's design. I think a lot of people... there's a good, I'm gonna reference a South Park episode because I'm that guy. I love South Park, and that's a good example, at least it is for my mind, of why people hate Field of the Dead decks, right? Field of the Dead, when it first came out, it was like Tweak's coffee shop, just like in a rural town of Colorado, and not really known by many people, but the people there loved it. Everyone loved getting a nice cup of coffee in the morning. But then imagine if that store turns into Starbucks and becomes, widely represented all over the world and just keep building more and more shops all across the country and internationally and everything. Suddenly everybody knows about Starbucks, and Starbucks stops being that rural. I'm saying as if Starbucks was originally Tweak's coffee shop, but I guess you understand what I'm saying here. Like, it originated as a small thing, but it became really good and it became very popular and everybody knows about it. And all of a sudden, it's not edgy, it's not hipster, it's not cool, it's not unique. It's gotten global, and I'm going on this very weird tangent because that's kind of what happened with Field of the Dead. Field of the Dead. In a vacuum, the deck itself is really cool. It's a cool deck. I don't care, but Miguel, no, it's toxic. Shut the fuck up. It's good. It's a fantastic deck from flavor standpoint, synergy wise. The fact that you have to add in a bunch of different lands to make it work. It's a really cool deck. The first time I played Field of the Dead with Scapeshift, I was I was like experiencing maximum joy. Like I loved it. It was one of the coolest decks I had played in a while, and you can even check out that video. Like I was loving every aspect of it. It was so cool. It was so unique the way it worked, and seeing just me develop a massive board of zombies just felt so gratifying. What happened? What went wrong? The deck became too good. The deck became too consistent. And because the deck became too good and it became too consistent, it shut down other decks because it would beat them every single time, and thus late game decks got fucked. And that's when people went from loving it to despising it. It's not because inherently from its design it's bad. It's because it was too efficient. That's the problem. I say this because there are other successful, powerful decks in Standard that I am just vehemently against. Like I just despise. And it's not a matter of their power level. It's just because of how they function. And in this category, I would include primarily the Simic core decks. Decks that revolve around ramping into planeswalkers such as Akko and Nissa and just overwhelm you with tremendous proactive potential that goes off before you even get to do anything. With planeswalkers that are so significantly overstated in loyalty that not even a special tech card like Fried can kill them. That's different. Those decks don't play out in a unique, cool way. There's no, fun, cool-looking synergies going on. It's just units, mana dorks that ramp you, enabling you to play these broken-ass planeswalkers earlier than they're supposed to. They're already good, very powerful plays on curve, but if you play them even earlier, like, come on, what are you going to do against a turn 3 Nissa? Like, how often are games won when the opponent plays turn 3 Nissa while going first? What's the win rate against that? That's a different story. Field of the Dead is a cool card that is guilty of existing in the same set as Golos and in a metagame in which there's not enough answers for land cards. And that's why it has to go. But now that Field of the Dead is going to go, we may see control decks rise again and potentially take on what is going to be the driving force of the upcoming metagame, and that is Simic-based decks. They can, evolve into Band, Sultai. What's the other combination? Band, Sultai. I'm drawing a blank here. Timur. Timur, maybe. Probably will be Bant. And that's going to be rough. But here is the reasoning for only tackling Field of the Dead. Finally, we're aware of a few other community concerns regarding the Standard environment. I like the fact that they acknowledge this. I really like it. They could have just not done this and not even, mention it as a problem. But I really like that they did. Including that early acceleration into Planeswalkers can be frustrating and that the color green is strong across a variety of Standard archetypes. We'll continue to monitor the health of the environment, but feel it's important to allow the metagame to adjust to the absence of Field of the Dead before further evaluation. As a philosophy, we prefer the player's deck building and metagame choices drive the evolution of the environment whenever possible, rather than be our intervention. I gotta defend this. I think this is a responsible approach. We all know what eventually needs to happen, but at the same time, we all have to be open-minded and willing to accept that perhaps sometimes we're being a little bit arrogant. I can't guarantee you 100% that with Field of the Dead gone, Bant ramp decks and Akko Nissa based builds with Hydroid Crasses will be the driving force of Standard. Maybe there is something that we're all missing. You always have to be open to that possibility. And I like that they're going to wait out and let the metagame resolve, and then they'll get the data and they'll see what's up. If you're claiming you know this without fault, how it's going to end up, you're just being arrogant. You have to be open-minded. I like that. It's a bit of, got to take a bit of more of a humble approach. Unfortunately, we know 99% of the time it's going to end up how we know it's going to end up. And that's going to be a dominance of ramping into Akko and Nissa. And you could argue that, the data is so overwhelming that it would be more reasonable to just attack that. But at the very least, I like the fact that they acknowledge that they are aware of the problem, but they're willing to sit back and see how it actually resolves and then potentially address it. Unfortunately, like I said, this means that we are going to have to deal with this standard, and I'm not particularly looking forward to it because I'm not a fan of ramp into planeswalkers, particularly Nisa, and then play, 20 Hydroid Crassus for the win. I just don't think it's a particularly interesting deck. It's not really doing anything too convoluted. It's just playing stuff really early that's super broken, and then building up an obscene amount of mana early on because of Nisa, and playing even bigger stuff and filling up your hand, and then just playing Agent of Treachery and stealing your shit. It's not, I don't know, it's not the kind of Magic that I like. And I think there's a lot of people that agree in that regard. I despise Akko. I think Akko should never have been designed that way. I think it's just it's such a clear case of power creep. I just can't really think of any other case that's as obvious as Akko is. Like the fact that it's a 3-mana planeswalker that reaches 6 loyalty and that has a +1 that can be used as removal is just absolutely obscene. Also the fact that it can threaten you with the -5 at all times, making it so that neither your big creatures nor your small creatures really represent any threat at all if they keep developing their board. And a planeswalker that just automatically wins the game if it goes when you're on the play, if it's drop turn 2. Like, it's very hard to really beat that, because even if you have a bunch of haste units, you just don't have the mana. You're not at the curve to be able to deal that much damage to Akko. Let's not even talk about the fact that the opponent can develop blockers to protect them at that stage as well. So it's just, I have very strong opinion against 3-mana planeswalkers. I've had so for a long time. I thought they learned their lesson from atrocities such as Teferi Time Raveler and Narset when they designed Chandra Acolyte of Flame. I think Chandra Acolyte of Flame is the prime example of what 3-mana planeswalkers should be. Highly synergistic, flavorful, powerful, but fair. But then Akko happened. It's just like, okay, they learned nothing. We're back to stupidity, just overpowered again. And yeah, I have a very strong opinion against that. I like Field of Dead as a card. It's guilty of just being too good in its current environment. That's what it is. And I do agree with Merchant's take on making the land legendary. I think that would be a nice solution, but that would imply them, changing the card, which, is one of the limitations Magic the Gathering has as a card game, right? Because of the fact that they print on paper. But I like the card. I don't like Akko. I don't like Nisa. I don't dislike Hydroid Crassus. I think Hydroid Crassus is actually fine. I may disagree a little bit with Merchant there. I think it's just purely Nisa that makes it busted. But yeah, we're going to have to deal with quite a bit of that. So my journey towards this new metagame is going to be focusing on having fun. Not so much on making tier 1 decks constantly, but just making tier 3, tier 2 decks that work, are competitive, but are also unique and fun. And see if there are some cool late game strategies that we can explore now that Golo's Field of the Dead will no longer be a thing. And that's where I'll leave this video. Let me know if you guys agree with what I said. What is your own take on this ban? And what do you expect from Standard? Are you looking forward to Standard? What do you think about 3-mana planeswalkers? I'm always open to opening up that debate. I think it's very interesting. I really would like to start up a discourse about it in the comments if possible. And yeah, I appreciate you guys watching my videos. And hopefully, you found this useful, informing, in case you didn't know. And yeah, let me know what you think. Have a soul day. Thank you for watching. I'll stay, or I was going to say, I'll stay tuned. Stay tuned for daily videos. I'll see you guys tomorrow.